Right, I'm going to gently start, I think.
Well done.
Be the sensible thing to do. We have got, how many people have we got at the moment? We've got 17 people, so that's good enough to start, I think. So please do ask questions, because otherwise I might not have anything to say. Because once I start making, I can get really lost in the moment and all my words dry up. So questions will be really useful. So today you've joined me on a class about using ingredients from your garden. And my work with flowers historically hasn't always been with seasonal flowers because of the work that I've done. I've freelanced for big event companies in London, and I've worked for high street florists. And of course, they're using flowers that come from Holland, come from all over the world. And so it's not truly seasonal. Now, working for myself, everything I do is absolutely seasonal and generally from my garden. And when I need more, it's from local growers. And it does mean I'm not doing much in the winter, but that suits me. A little break through the winter. But as you can see, it's March, early March, and there are still things you can use. And I think the joy and the pleasure of using things that are of the moment from right now at this time with the weather conditions, it's a beautiful way to work, and it makes me really happy because it's constantly changing. You don't quite know what's going to come next because the sun can be out one minute, like last weekend. It could be almost below freezing this weekend. So you never quite know what you're going to get. And it just makes that overlap of the seasons slightly different every year. I just find it a very exciting way to work. I don't want peonies in December. That's not exciting. It's like having strawberries any time of the year. Who wants strawberries any time of the year? You want them in June when they taste really good. So that's how I feel about flowers as well. And it's very important to me that they are locally grown and British, obviously.
So can I ask a question?
Of course.
Just, so when did you start growing your flowers in your garden? When did you,
Well,
does
I've
it
always
take a long time?
no, I've always picked from my garden. I've been a lifelong adult amateur gardener, self-taught. So my skills are not enormous, but they serve the purpose that I need them for. If I want perfect flowers, I go to the flower farmers. They know what they're doing. But I suppose I started growing flowers in a dedicated cut flower patch in my garden, probably about 5 years ago is when I started. And I was growing more veg. The veg have all disappeared apart from the asparagus bed because it's all been taken over by flowers. But I'm happy to pick from anywhere in the garden. And I know some people just aren't. It makes them feel a bit twitchy. You know, something beautiful has just come through and they can't bear to cut the head off it. But
Oh, so first
oh
question.
yeah.
First question is, what proportion of flowers, plant material grown in your own garden would typically feature in your commercial work?
Well, that's a very good question because my whole business premise has changed entirely. And if I'm being really honest, and it is important to be honest, if you're an event florist, which is what I used to be, it isn't possible, as things stand at the moment, to use entirely British flowers at some points in the season, perhaps in the summer. But for the rest of the year, you are going to have to get flowers in from elsewhere. But now I only teach. And so I can make sure that everything I'm using is from the garden. I tend not to teach in the winter. I am starting my first class at the end of March, socially distanced, outside in the cold or whatever the weather. Because as you can see, the things are starting to emerge. So, you know, I really want florists and people who love flowers to start moving in a direction that is much more environmentally sensitive. But it isn't possible to have a fully commercial business event floristry where you are only using British grown flowers at the moment. There's just not enough flower out there. And there are plenty of really big commercial flower growers that are growing fairly ubiquitous flowers that you can get through the winter, but you can't furnish a whole event through the winter. And of course, people have to pay their mortgages and feed the kids and that kind of stuff. So what I'm trying to get people to do is to think more about where it comes from, and when they can, in the summer and in the seasonal months, use more British flowers. I think that's the important message I'm trying to get across, if that answers that question. So going back to being sustainable and environmentally conscious, I don't use floral foam either. I'll get my little bandwagons out of the way straight up. So I don't use it because it's a microplastic. Of course, in my life, I've used a lot, but I never use it now, and I will never use it again. It's a microplastic that doesn't biodegrade, and it's sort of made to look like it might be terribly friendly and you can throw it in a compost bin. You can't. So I don't use it. Instead, and I was doing this when I was doing my event floristry as well, I use chicken wire, water, frogs, anything to support the flowers. There's actually always a way that you can arrange with flowers that doesn't involve using floral foam. Again, I'm never going to criticise somebody for feeling they need to use it for speed, or they've got so much to do, they've got to prepare so far in advance, they want to use it. So I'm all about trying to get people to make little steps towards being a bit more conscious of what they're doing than being, can't think of the word, strident about it. Perhaps that's the word. So what I'm going to use today, I've got this lovely vintage pot that I got for about £3 from a car boot sale. Back when car boot sales were a thing. Got lots of nice little pots. I'm going to use this frog, an old pin frog that came from a second-hand shop. It's used multiple times and it's a little bit rusty. And I'm using a little bit of floral tack. Now, I'm not convinced that this is going to be remotely environmentally friendly, but there are some things. I don't know how I would get this to stay in the bowl without the floral tack. So just a little bit of that, but it can be reused over and over and over again. So I don't throw it away, I just reuse it. And then what I do is I push this frog into the bottom of the bowl. And as I push it in, I kind of twist it at the same time. And it makes the tack stick to the bowl. But the bowl and the frog need to be really, really dry. If they're wet, it doesn't work so well. So that's in there. I can now turn it upside down. And then on top of that, some chicken wire. And I think, and again, it's galvanized. It's not going to be wholly environmentally friendly, obviously. However, I use this over and over and over and over again. So it's not single use.
Okay, just a question there. Does the rust on the frog affect the longevity of the flowers? So will it have with the water, I suppose? And
yes, that's a really good question, and people ask it all of the time. And if I'm being really honest, I haven't noticed that it does. But people do say that it does. But that hasn't been my experience. So I can only tell you what my own experience is. Having said that, once I've made something, both when I was doing the serious event floristry and when I'm making things with clients when I'm teaching or making things for myself for Instagram, for me it's all about the making. So what happens is I make it, if it was going to an event, it's used that day, the next day.
Yeah.
Thrown on the compost heap. So it hasn't had a week, 10 days sitting in a bowl. If I'm making something for myself, I leave this workroom once I've made it and I don't look at it again until it's a mouldy heap up a corner. Because for me, it's about the making. It's not the thing I've made. They never really sort of leave this room and go on display anywhere else. That's a terrible confession, isn't it? But it's my moment of peace and quiet is just making. So that's a really good question that I can only answer, and I haven't noticed it, but that might be because I'm just not noticing. I know you can get really, this was secondhand, but you can get very, very expensive ones that do not rust. So if you are worried about
yeah, so where do you get the frog from?
I have got locally, I've got frogs from Wendy's at, now what on earth is the business name? WM, what are they called? I'm so used to calling it Wendy's, I can't think of the actual business name. In the middle of nowhere, near the flower mast at, the television mast. I'm going to have to look it up. I just can't think what it's called.
So is it called Wendy's?
It's WM something, and she's called Wendy.
Yeah, and it's locally to Suffolk.
Yes,
Okay.
literally in the middle of nowhere. You have to work out where you're going because you can get very lost. Anyway, back to the chicken wire. I've scrunched it in. I think of the chicken wire as scaffolding, so I like to make sort of little layers with it so that it will hold the stems as I put them in. So I've got the frog in the bottom and then I've got a scrunch of chicken wire on top. I don't make it too tight because I want to be able to get the stems in. And actually, hellebores, which I'm using today, they have quite thick stems. If you're wondering why that's dark at the bottom, I've given them the boiling water treatment, which I'll talk to you about in just a moment. It's my top tip with hellebores because they can be a bit tricksy. Now, the one thing I do recommend that you use, and this is not remotely environmentally friendly because you can't use it again, is a little bit of florist's tape, just to hold your chicken wire in. So I tape that across the top of the bowl, because if you do need to take a stem out, if you don't tape it in, the whole lot can come out, including the chicken wire, which is very, very irritating. So that just holds the chicken wire in place. Now you see, Mandy, the pink ones, I picked them up, they don't cut through it.
No, they don't, do they? We need some of those really strong scissors.
Yeah. And then I scrunched the tape sort of shut on itself. So I've still got all of that space that I wanted. So that just holds it in, that shouldn't come out now. It's another beautiful thing about using chicken wire rather than foam is that you can, if something's not placed correctly, if you don't like where it is, you can take it out and put it in again. With foam, you can't, or you shouldn't do that because you've left a hole and a stem might go into that hole and not drink anymore because it's got nowhere to get water from. Obviously, I need to put water in here now. Oops. So that's what I will do. And I water right to the top. It is astonishing how much flowers drink. And if you're just using water, you'll be shocked at how quickly that water goes down. So you need to top it up almost every day. Mandy, somebody disturbing you?
Yeah, something like I'm in my shop. I'm really sorry. They're trying. I'll talk to you later. Sorry.
So I have got ingredients. Nearly all of it's come from my garden. Some of it's come from my neighbour's garden. I've got some sweet little narcissus that I was worried they were never going to pop out for this weekend, but they've popped open. Hellebores, of course.
So pretty.
I don't think you can have too many hellebores in your garden. I really don't. And going back to the hot water treatment, hellebores can be really tricksy. People struggle with them because they pick them, they use them, and then they're flopped by the next day. The trick is to pick them once they've started to make a seed pod, so once they've been pollinated. If there's no flower on the plant that's been pollinated and you pick it, it will flop over. It needs to have been pollinated, and people then say, oh, but then they're not so beautiful because they start to lose their ruffles. But there's always something that's left. Like, so this one's been pollinated and this one's still coming out. So I think they're just as beautiful, whichever stage they're in, really. So the hot water treatment sounds brutal. You boil the kettle, you put about an inch of water in the bottom of a mug or something, having freshly cut your hellebores, you plunge them into the hot water, protecting their heads from the steam, for 10 to 12 seconds, and then immediately plunge them as deep as you can into cold water and leave them to rest overnight. And that way they know who's boss. They should stay upright and behave.
So I have a question. Are you using specific varieties of hellebores?
These have, I mean, I bought them all for my garden, but I've had several iterations of puppies and I have no labels left. So I can't, I'm hopeless at keeping labels or keeping records of what I plant in the garden. So I can't tell you what these are specifically called, but they've all been bought from plant centres or online or somewhere. And lots of them are actually starting to make babies in the garden. So they'll be little hybrids of, in fact, I think I found a hybrid the other day and sent it off for identification. And they didn't recognise it, but said it was a hybrid. So I was very excited about that because it was beautiful.
And a lovely lady says, I'm one of those that struggles to pick garden flowers. What are the best cut and come again flowers like a freesia?
Actually, hellebores, you will see that they will come again. Not all of them, but you can see there's more shoots coming on some of the plants. Of course, a lot of garden plants aren't cut and come again. And I think if you are very worried about picking things, then you need to start thinking about sowing some annuals specifically for cutting that you can cut and then they'll come again. I mean, something that is just the most tremendous giving flower is late spring, early summer, of course, is a sweet pea. I mean, the more you cut, the more you get. If you don't cut, they're going to die. So you just cut them. And dahlias in the autumn, late summer, early autumn. The more you pick, the more you'll get. So they would be my two top absolutes. And then there's other gorgeous little things like the annual phlox, which is so pretty. And again, if you cut it, you'll just get more and more and more. So many of them, the annuals, if you cut them, if they don't actually get to make seed, if you cut them before they make seed, they'll just keep trying, poor little things, to make another flower to try and make some seeds. So I think if you really don't want to pick from the garden, that would be, even if you're just sowing them into pots that you just nurture by the back door, whatever that you want to bring in. I mean, tulips, they're a tremendous flower, but of course, that's a one-hit wonder. Once it's gone, it's gone. Similarly with peonies, if you cut that peony head, you're not going to get another one. You might have got 5 on the plant, but you're only going to get 5. So I completely understand that. Oh, it's looking gorgeous, I don't want to pick it. It's just not how I feel. Right, I'm start arranging. I have got...
She says, that was Breeder. She says, thank you.
You're welcome. I have got... This time of year I find so exciting because...
I've got one more question, sorry.
Go.
Do you do the hot water treatments on all cut flowers? That's from Emma.
No. Most are absolutely fine, so long as you cut them early in the day, I mean really early in the morning, or late in the evening, not in the middle of the day. In the summer, when it's a 25-degree day, don't pick them at midday and think they're going to last. They won't. The best time is actually early in the morning, so they've had all night to kind of rehydrate and gather their wits. And pick them and put them straight into water. So I will go down the garden with buckets of water and put them straight into water. Most flowers are absolutely fine without being treated in any harsh way whatsoever. They just want a drink of water. So hopefully that helps. I would say with everything, just try it in water. If that doesn't work, then maybe try the hot water treatment. If you pick something like Lily of the Valley, there is of course always some tricksy flower that has its own special requirements, but they're very few. But Lily of the Valley does quite like being put into warm water, sort of as hot as you can run your tap without it hurting you. Put them into warm water and then just let them sit there and let the water go cool. And they seem to really like that treatment. That shows them who's boss as well. But most things are pretty biddable and get on with it. So back to the spirea. I love this time of year because you've got all the little tiny, tiny leaves starting to emerge. And if you're familiar with my designs, I quite like that loose, airy, open feel. And so this time of year just gives me that in spades. You know, I've not got heavy green. I'm not a massive fan of heavy green. I've just got hints. I've got a flush of something going on. And then you've got these beautiful shapes created by the old branches. And on here is just bits of lichen and things as well. I love all of that. I love things when they're freshly emerging. I love things when they're dead. I love things when they're roses in a bowl that softly clatter to the table when you're eating your supper. I just think it's just so magical. All of those stages are wonderful. So the shape of things is really important, and I'm trying to find interesting shapes to just add movement and recreate the garden in a bowl. That's what I'm always trying to do. How does it grow in the garden, and how can I make it look like that in the bowl? So I am going to start with a little bit of this. I've also got this beautiful early flowering plum, which has a lovely brown leaf. It's just looking gorgeous. It doesn't last very long, so our timing for this was just perfect. And I love it, so I'm going to use that as well. And I tend to start from the outside and work in, unless things are very, very delicate. So I've got fritillaria here, little snake's head fritillaria, and I'll be putting that in last because I don't want to damage it. But I do like things to sort of float and dance above everything else. So generally I start from the outside and work in, and I'm never worried about covering up my mechanics, the chicken wire and things, because people don't see it. People see what they want to see. So another florist or somebody who's into arranging flowers will go, oh, I can see the chicken wire, but no, nobody else will. They'll just go, oh, that's a lovely bowl of flowers, hopefully. So it would be very tempting to cut this gorgeous shape off, but I'm not going to. And I'm going to make this towards myself, but I keep turning it around to show you, because otherwise it's very hard for me to see what I'm doing. But I want to try and keep this shape. Now the beauty of this frog, my rusty frog, is that these woody stems I can put into that frog and it will hold it in place. The first stems do move around a little bit. And again, I don't worry about that because I like them to find their own space. I always feel like I let them arrange themselves. That probably sounds a bit disingenuous, but that's kind of how it feels to me. I put them in, and if it flops round and says, no, I really want to face this way, then I'm happy for it to do that. Whereas if it was in floral foam, it would be stiff just where you've put it. That's not what I want. That doesn't feel very garden-y to me. Put another little bit of this in. So I've got a bit going this way, with my lovely flourish going out towards you. I will take a photograph of this when we've finished, and I'll put it on Instagram if you want to go and see it, because I know it's not so easy to see on Zoom. I'm going to give that another little cut. My top tip is try to only cut once, because you can't stick it back on again. So I'll offer things up and see if it needs a cut. So I'm going to be imagining that this is going on a sideboard or something, so I haven't got to worry about the back. But don't think that you shouldn't put things in the back, because a design is all about the 3D and the movement and the eye travelling through it. So I need things at the back, but it hasn't got to look stunningly beautiful from the back, because it's going against a wall. So that's probably enough of the spirea at the moment. Let's get some of this blossom in. just the simplest, prettiest, most magical little flowers. Love them.
Is that from your garden? That's from your garden?
Yes.
Yeah.
I mean, I've been in this garden for 20 years, but I inherited this. And I think if you do inherit little treasures, just wonderful. This is not something I could imagine living without now. I wait for it this time of year. I kind of go out and talk to it every day. Are you going to? And of course, it started doing its thing last weekend in that lovely sunshine. And even had bees visiting it, which was wonderful. Because this time of year, when the bees do have some slightly warmer weather, they do like to go and have somewhere to feed. I'm snipping up through the woody ends just to help them hydrate. So I give them a fresh cut and snip up the stem a little way, probably about a centimetre up.
I've just got to let somebody in.
And to start off with, I'm trying to put things around the edge. I can almost get to the end and I haven't put anything in the middle. As you can see, balancing these first pieces can be quite hard. And it's all about giving each piece its own space, each flower its own space, sort of celebrating each little element.
So Christina says, are you making sure that the stems stick to the frog? So they kind of go in?
Sometimes I can feel that they've just been caught by the chicken wire, and that's okay. But at this early stage, the first few stems I do want to go into the frog if possible, because it helps. You get to a certain point and you've got enough stems in there that it's all knitting together and it all holds in place. These first few ones can be a little bit tricksy. I'll show you what I've done towards the front. So I've got blossom stretching forward, but it does mean I need to have a bit of blossom stretching back, even though you're now looking at the front and I'm looking at the back. It means that the eye is now travelling all the way through the arrangement, if you see what I mean. I'm going to end up not wanting to put any hellebores in, because this is going to be just so lovely with blossom. I will put hellebores in.
So can you just explain to Nikki what the frog is?
The frog is, it's got a very heavy metal base. I suppose in the past it would have been lead, possibly still is, I'm not sure. It's very, very heavy. In fact, let me get one out of the drawer. If I can find one. Isn't that difficult? Here's one, completely different shape, but it's got a heavy metal base, and then it's got these pins, quite sharp. I wouldn't recommend. It's like a bed of nails, basically, and you put that in the bottom of your vessel, and you stick your stems through those pins to hold it in place.
And it doesn't damage it, does it? It just kind of, it's helping it to absorb the water. Yeah.
And it's just stabilising it into the position you want it to go into. Honestly, this blossom is magical.
It's so sculptural, isn't it? It's kind of creating, it's starting to create such a pretty shape.
I mean, the hedgerow is full of, it's not hawthorn, I always call it hawthorn, it's blackthorn, isn't it, at the moment? Which is very, very similar. lovely, lovely little simple white flower flushing up through the hedgerows. That's beautiful to use as well. I'm just going to take another bit of spirea and put that towards the back, which is your front at the moment. Just extend that movement backwards. It's probably enough for now. Oh, I tell you what I did do. I completely cheated and forced some of my magnolia. So I picked this about 10 days ago, and I just had it inside and it's opened up. Now, it's never as beautiful as if it opens up naturally, but it does mean you can get yourself a little early flower fix if you want to. And any of these branching woody stem things that you know are going to have early flowers, if you pick them 2 or 3 weeks before you can just see the buds starting, bring them in, you can get some early deliciousness.
They're very similar. So I was looking at the Art for Cure website, and Emma Green's got the most beautiful blossom paintings on there. They are absolutely stunning. And just seeing this and the kind of delicacy of it, they are beautiful.
Really, and I think perhaps we love them so much as well because we've had nothing for what feels like a long time.
They're so uplifting. They are
yes,
so uplifting.
Absolutely. So I feel that this is my structure. I basically created my shape. I'm now going to start to fill in with flowers. So I've got little pockets of space that I can put flowers into. And I'm going to keep in mind all of the time, I want there to be space. Space is more important than just stuffing in lots of flowers, because I want it to feel like everything can breathe and move. And if it was outside, there was a wind and it could, you know, it could rustle in the breeze. It's got space. So that's the plan with these heavy helleborus. I mean, look at that. It's beautiful. Absolutely gorgeous.
So somebody's just said, Nicola, so that the frog is also known as a Japanese Kenzar.
Yes.
The Nawaki ones are made of brass and don't rust. So the Nawaki ones we have in the shop, we can get those in the shop because we sell Nawaki. We love Nawaki.
And they are, you know, obviously you get what you pay for. So
yeah.
Those ones are brilliant. They're not going to rust, and they are more expensive. I mean, they're going to last you forever. You can pass them on to family members who catch the gardening stroke flowery bug. I mean, they're going to last forever, which is why I've got them from second-hand shops. You know, people do house clearances and there's a drawer full of pin frogs or kenzans. But of course, I can't guarantee if I'm buying them from a second-hand shop that they're not going to go rusty. Now I've put this so that we've got a flower facing forwards and one facing up. Now I haven't had to do anything except just place it. It's doing that all by itself, and I love that. I love flowers when I'm arranging for them to be facing in all sorts of different directions, all at different heights. And in fact, although this is the front, to have a flower facing backwards. I mean, if you think about the back of a tulip, the patterning and colour on the back of a tulip can be actually more exquisite than the front of a tulip. So show off the back. You know, there's, in the garden, you're not asking everything to face forwards like a row of people in a choir. They're all higgledy-piggledy and at different heights and have reacted differently to the weather and the sun, and unless they're sunflowers and they all move, don't they?
So I have a question. So when you're, because I love with some of your displays, you use lots of vintage vases, and I mean I love vases. So when you choose the vase, do you then choose the flowers to go with them, because they're obviously going to have the structure's going to make it slightly different?
Yeah, that's a really good question, and I suppose I suppose the honest answer is I've been doing it such a long time. I don't know that I'm thinking about it, but I must be thinking about it, and I am led by the ingredients. So I haven't gone for an urn now.
Mm.
I haven't got enough ingredients. I've got plenty of big urns, but unless I just use branches, which I could have done, the ingredients are going to look lost. So it's a time for little bowls. Having said that, I love little bowls in the summer as well. In fact, they're my favourite things to do. I do like to think about the colour of them,
Yeah.
and how that might work with the flowers. So I think the flowers are my starting point. They're always my starting point. It's what's available outside, and then I'm bringing the outside in, and what have I got inside that will celebrate those flowers, basically.
Lovely.
Now these hellebors are still going into the frog. I've still got space in the frog. So these are dangling towards the front, and you can't see the face of any of them.
Oh, so pretty.
But they are just as beautiful from behind as they are. And in fact, hellebores in the garden, you almost need to get down on your tummy to look at their little faces, because they all sort of hang down, don't they?
So I've got another question. Sorry.
Good.
I love the turntable that you have. Have you had that made? Because obviously something like that's really lovely to be able to turn your display round.
No, I got this for £4.99
Okay.
from what is the place called? I want to say it's like an IKEA, but you have to travel the country to get to IKEA, don't you? There's one in Ipswich, and they do.
Is it Dunelm?
Somewhere like that, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, you can get them anywhere. And I've turned it upside down, I'll show you. And there's a very good reason why I've turned it upside down. So, I've actually got the foot up.
Oh, okay.
That way, if my bowl moves, then it could slip. So that way, it stays nice and stable. That's my top tip for using your Lazy Susan. And I use them in my classes, so I've got quite a lot, but at £4.99 you can't really complain. I think another beautiful thing about using things in the right season is that somehow all the colours just work together as well. They just, I feel like I don't have to think about the colour too much. I mean, I think colour is very, very important, and I do like things to tone and to find sort of colour transitions if I want to go from one radical colour to another.
So Julia says you can get the turntable, ladies, in the range.
That's where I got it from, the range. That's exactly where they came from.
Do you strip the leaves from most of your stems? Natalie says. Natalia says.
I do.
I hope that was right pronunciation. Sorry if I.
There's a reason why I do that, and that's because I'm not a massive fan of green for a start. And I know a lot of my floral friends love green. There's nothing wrong with green, it's just I'm not a massive fan of it. So that's why I take the leaves off. So I'm not taking them off for any other particular reason than that. Although, of course, if you take the leaves off, the hydration is going to the flower rather than also being shared with the leaves. So that helps as well from a hydration point of view. But I'm just not super keen on lots of green, which, given I feel I have quite a gardening style, sounds very counterintuitive. But yes, I do take a lot of the leaves off. So I've got a little one here that I took off, and I'm going to tuck him right down there. People say to me, why are your flowers hymns rather than hers? I don't really have an answer for that.
Natalia says, do you find it easy to find clients who appreciate your garden style approach to flower arrangements?
I think it just comes with time. And as people, I'm very happy to say no to things. If it's not my style, I won't do it, and I'll recommend that they go to some. There are plenty of florists who will do whatever you want, and that's what their business is built on, and they enjoy doing that. I don't. I like to work like this, and so for sure there are some people who just don't get it, they don't want it, it's not their idea of beauty. So it has taken time to find clients who appreciate it, but I think that actually increasingly there's a movement towards wanting a more natural style, or maybe I just feel like that because that's what I'm immersed in. But I think people are becoming more and more in touch with seasonality, and I think perhaps that started with people being conscious of where their food came from and things like that as well. So there is definitely a movement towards it, and I certainly don't find that people come to me and ask me for something that I'm not going to do now, but maybe that's just taken time to get people to understand what it is I do.
She agrees.
I've got some little bits that fell off when I was picking, and I'm just going to tuck those down into this little bit in the middle that I haven't put anything in yet. I sort of see that as like a little pond in the middle, and it reflects the light, which is why I'm not so worried about actually completely covering it all up. I'm not going to waste those dear little heads. They can go through there.
So from Christina, she says, some things must die earlier. Do you replace them little by little until the whole thing dies?
Well, going back to what I said before, when I'm doing it for myself, I'm making it, and that's what I've enjoyed. If I was giving it to a client, that's exactly the advice I would say. I would say, you know, this plum blossom is probably going to go over before anything else. And you can either take it out, or you can then enjoy the leaves emerging. It depends what you're looking for. But absolutely, if I'm giving this to a client, I would say some things are going to go over. Either take it out and be just happy with the gap, or pop something else in. The key thing is keeping that water topped up. If that water goes down in our centrally heated homes, that's so quick. They gulp down the water. That's the best way of preserving the life of your arrangements, is just make sure the water is topped up all of the time.
So Belinda says, do you put anything in the water to keep the flowers longer? How often, and then how often would you change the water? Because you know, like you occasionally, I mean, when you buy a bunch of flowers, you do keep the water nice and fresh.
Yes, I don't put anything in the water. I make sure that my vessels are clean, and I put in clean water, and then I just keep topping them up with clean water. I have no evidence for this, except it's my own personal opinion, which I'm happy to share with you. Probably shouldn't. But I do wonder whether flower food is slightly a little bit of a, well, let's just say it's an extra thing they can sell to florists to pass on. I'm not convinced about it. I think making sure your vessel is clean and keeping that water topped up, this is, after all, something that is going to die. You can't keep it going forever. And so I'm not interested in trying to put all sorts of chemicals in there to try and keep it going. So I don't actually know what's in those flower food sachets either. So no, I don't use anything like that.
Natalia says it looks stunning already. It does. It looks beautiful. It's just so beautiful.
So I think I've almost got enough hellebores coming out into the space, and I'm now just tucking a few little heads down into my pond in the middle. But before I fill up the space too much, I would like to get in some of my snowdrops, which honestly are nearly going over. I certainly would be giving these to a client because They really are nearly at the end of their life. Now with snowdrops, if I were to scatter them all the way through, they'd just be completely wasted. So I put them together as a little clump, just as if they're growing. If I scatter them through, you won't see them. It just looks a bit fussy. Whereas if I put them together at different heights, they'll grab your attention. And that's how they are in the garden. It's a lovely little clump. And again, I'm trying to make their heads go in different directions. Just to add a bit of movement and action to the scene. They've got such tiny thin stems, it's quite hard to get them to go exactly where you want. Which again, I go back to my point really of eventually they'll do their own thing. I mean, I'm sure you all know, if you buy a bunch of tulips, you put them in a vase, you think you've arranged them beautifully, you come down the next day and they've made their own shapes. They go in whichever direction they fancy because they're still growing in the vase and they're moving towards the light. I love that. Flowers having their own sense of where they want to go and what they want to be, choosing who they are.
It's lovely because, again, obviously with the Bloom exhibition, we've been looking at vases and we've got gorgeous ceramicists. And one of our artists is called Stephen James Wills, and he has produced these beautiful vases that are kind of tree-like. I mean, it's been amazing. They've actually all sold now, but they're fantastic because they look like stems, and when you can use them to kind of exactly what you're doing, they're almost holding the flowers individually.
Yes.
Which is so beautiful, and they kind of fall into place. No, it's because I love vases, and we have got some amazing, they've produced some beautiful work, and Stephen's done so well, but he does take commissions.
I think the beautiful handcrafted, well, you can't beat them. And they have, I mean, they're beautiful just as objects on their own.
Yeah.
But then you fill them with flowers as well. It just feels like a celebration of everything. It's lovely, handcrafted. I've got quite a growing little collection of much more expensive handmade bowls as well as my £2.50, £3.
Well, that's the beauty. So, Emma, it was Stephen James Wills. If you go onto the Art Couture website, they are really, really beautiful, and you'll see lots of the other artists have produced, beautiful vases and bowls. Breda says, I have quite a lot of glass vases and bowls, which would show the chicken wire. What leaves are good to camouflage the wire whilst keeping a garden style? So obviously
in a glass vase.
Yeah.
I think ivy can be brilliant. A swirl of ivy, and then put your chicken wire in.
Yeah.
Although actually, I also think that sometimes you can worry about that too much, and nobody's going to be looking. They're going to be looking at what's happening up here. They're not going to be looking at what's happening down here. I think when we're the maker, all we can see is the things that we think might be slightly wrong or that people will notice, and that's not what people see as an observer. They are drawn to the beauty of what you've got happening up here, and they don't notice what's happening down there. So personally, I don't particularly worry about it. I'm quite happy to put in a chunk of chicken wire. You can get copper wire, which can look really beautiful, all on its own. Actually, does exactly the same thing. It's like chicken wire, but it's copper, so it's very beautiful. You can see it. You put your stems in there. I'm using the galvanized wire, that's the same. But if you are really worried about seeing it, a swirl of ivy, I've got some ivy here, swirl of ivy will just do the trick.
And Natalia says that she tends to overthink her stem placement. Does one's confidence grow just with more practice?
Absolutely. They're nothing Nothing can beat practice and learning from your mistakes. And remembering that what you think is a mistake, nobody else will notice. It goes back to we're our own worst critics.
Yeah.
But certainly, I, perhaps not in the winter because I don't have enough ingredients, but as a general rule, I make something every day. One, because it just makes me happy, calms me down. It's my way of relaxing. But also, I love doing it. But of course, it's practice as well. So it becomes a sort of something you don't have to think about too much, because you can overthink it. And I think once you start overthinking it, you start to panic and you put too much in, and then you get cross. And I think once you get to that stage, that's the point where you need to stop, put your scissors down, go and have a cup of tea, and come back to it a couple of hours later with completely fresh eyes. And I absolutely guarantee you'll look at it and go, I don't know why I was worrying, that's lovely. It's too easy to be so involved in the moment, and you step back and go, what have I done? That's a disaster. Go and have a cup of tea. You won't feel like that when you come back. You'll go, that really is so, if I just move that to here, that solved the problem I thought I had that was unsolvable. So
a cup of tea will solve everything, won't it?
A cup of tea does, yes. A cup of tea and possibly a biscuit. So now I'm putting in my Fritillaria. Now I buy these as plants every year, and then I put them in the garden, and slowly I've got more and more coming up every year, because I don't think you can have too many snake's head Fritillaria. They are just the most beautiful, beautiful things. Again, a really simple flower on the face of it, but then when you look at the markings, you think that's not simple at all. That's just extraordinary.
The colours are so beautiful.
Well, they do. There is something about using seasonal flowers. They do tend to work together. It's you may have noticed I did pick up a narcissus, but I'm not going to put it in. I feel like it would be too much, actually, if I were to suddenly put in.
Yeah, it's too
Yeah,
bright.
it's just going to just blow my mind. But what I have got, I've got a little pot of primula, and I might put those in because they're very pretty. Then they'll get planted in the garden as well. Just a little bit of something extra to attract the eye. And again, I'm only going to put 2 bits in, but I'm going to put them next to each other, because that's how they grow in the garden. I've got another pot here. I'm going to put 1 more bit in. Like a little self-sower, he's jumped the back. Because of course,
nice comments coming, by the way. Very beautiful.
Oh, thank you. I'm conscious of the time as well. What is it?
It's 4 minutes, but we're fine at the moment. If you were going to buy 3 garden plants to use as cut flowers, what would you buy?
That's a really hard question.
That's from Emma.
Asking me to choose my favourite child. I think garden roses, proper scented garden old-fashioned roses, are almost unbeatable, and I know that's an obvious thing to say, but oh my goodness, just glorious. So I would have to have those in the garden. I'm going to give you 4. So in the winter, it would have to be hellebores. In the spring, fritillaria. I'm thinking blossom fritillaria, summer roses, autumn dahlias.
Yeah.
But that's tough.
They're all different sizes, aren't they?
Pardon?
They're all different sizes. So
Yes.
they're
I think that's another thing I'm always looking for when I'm trying to create something is I want little tiny delicate things, and I kind of see them as my divas. So the divas in this arrangement are the helleborus, and then I've got my dancers like the fritillaria, and then I have the old chorus just holding everything up, which would be the spirea. And I just think they all need to sort of be slightly different sizes to play those roles, if you see what I mean.
Yeah, so Natalia says, do you have any recent discoveries, new varieties from the flower plant world you are particularly excited about?
Something that was coming over from Holland and started probably about 5 years ago. I think it came over from the Far East, which is where it was developed, is butterfly ranunculus. And I have now got some growing in my garden, and I'm very excited about those. Oh my goodness, ranunculus, that should be on my top list as well. How could I have forgotten ranunculus? Oh. Anyway, butterfly ranunculus are just beautiful. Now, I got mine from Sarah Raven. There must be other suppliers, and I'm not going to pretend that hers were cheap, but I just had to have them because they're so gorgeous.
Yeah, so can I ask, what's the difference between a normal ranuncular and a butterfly ranuncular?
They are a much more simple flower, and they grow as a sort of on a stem. You get multi-heads on the stem, and they last for ages. I mean, you can get 3 weeks in a vase out of them, which for a garden flower, you know, if it's a chrysanthemum or a carnation or something from the garden, yes, it's going to last. But there are most things you can hope for a week. But these butterfly ranunculus, a good 3 weeks. They're just gorgeous. So that's something I have been very excited about. And I need more. In fact, they're in bud at the moment in my garden, which I'm slightly concerned about. I mothed them up with lots of fleece last night because we were forecast -5, which I don't think actually happened. So they were highly cosseted.
Yeah, so Sarah says, are they hardy in your garden?
I've had them outside the whole time, but in a sheltered position. So I had them alongside the greenhouse last summer, and then over winter I brought them in next to the house so that they've got the warmth of the wall of the house as well. And I knew that was a risk. I did wonder, should I actually keep them in the greenhouse? But my greenhouse isn't heated, so you know, if it's -10 like it was recently, the greenhouse isn't going to give them that much protection. And outside my kitchen, against the wall, fleeced, they survived that -10. And as I say, those buds are. So I reckon a bit of sunshine in a couple of weeks, I might have a butterfly ranunculus, which would be lovely.
So in your garden, assuming they're in pots, what size are they?
The butterfly ranunculus right now?
Or, so, yes, assuming pots, what size?
Oh, so
Pots, sorry. Yeah.
I've got one plant in a pot that's probably a foot wide and about that deep. And I will, once it's finished flowering, I'll repot it. I'll give it a bigger space in the hope that I can get it to keep going. So this is its 2nd year. So long as they don't suddenly keel over with something ghastly happening to them, this will be their 2nd year flowering, which I wasn't completely expecting. So that's made me very happy as well. Oh, and something else I tried was Lysianthus. Now they really are tricksy, and I don't claim to be a great gardener. Things get on with it or they don't get on with it in my garden. They don't get cosseted too much. But I've managed to keep my Lysianthus going, so I wonder if they'll flower again this year. I've had them in my bedroom all winter. My poor husband.
So Amanda says, do they stay in pots all the time? Or do you take them out and replant them? Or
They will stay in pots just so that I can move them around depending on the conditions. If I put them in the ground, and we had a beast from the east or something, they would be very hard to look after. So, and I might forget about them. Whereas if they're in pots, they're looking at me, imploring me to look after them. So, but I will pot them on and give them fresh soil and a bigger space when they need it.
Fantastic. It looks beautiful.
Well, I will take a photo because I'm conscious it looks a bit blurry on here, but and you've got all of this clutter. So I shall put it on an empty table and take a photograph. But I hope you enjoyed it. Are there any other questions?
Yeah, it's been fantastic. Well, I've loved it. I hope everybody else has loved it. And yeah, no, thank you so much. It's been fantastic. And please, please go and have a look at the Art for Cure website because it's been amazing. The support has been incredible.
Well,
everybody's gone mad. I can tell Brigitte all the messages, but they've all loved it. They've learnt so much. Thank you for that little bit of spring. So good. Thank you.
Thank you. Just very honoured that you were here. Thank you so much.
It's been wonderful. It's been lovely. A really nice thing to do on a Saturday.
Yeah. A gloomy Saturday. Gloomy
Saturday. So thank you
so much.
I'll stay on with you guys, but bye.
Thank you.
Thank you. Take care. Bye.